you could know in just a moment's notice. It could only take a moment's time for you to find that love is happening to you. And if it's true, the end of your blues is here and it's clear at a moment's notice. You will see it in your lover's eyes. Don't be surprised. Be already in a moment's notice. Love holding you to see that you will be together for all time. A moment's time for you to find that you could be experimental and inconsequential. Occurrence happening that starts in your heart. When opportunity is knocking at your front door, you will know it in a moment. And you had better see the reality that's headed for you when you do get a clue. You gotta know the time to show it, don't blow it. It could be coming any day. Don't forget, don't sweat it, you'll get it if you let it. Your intuition says it might be right. No need to get all uptight. You had better take a chance to make it romance. That's the way you can make your break. Hit it, big hit on the gig. And you can make it if you really try. Don't you cry wondering why it's not getting hot and hitting the top. Can't you see harmony of mind? Don't come from crying, keep on trying, give it up, or you'll be out of luck when that moment is
Good
coming.
evening.
Oh, you have had it.
I hope everyone is doing well. It is 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and make sure we start on time. We've got folks who are currently joining. And we want to thank you all for taking time out of what we know is a busy time for everyone to share with us as we talk about this very important issue. And we just sitting here looking at folks rolling in. We still have a few more folks who are coming, and so I don't want to get started. Let me just give them a few more seconds for folks to get settled. All right. Well, good evening again, and welcome to the North Carolina Central University's COVID-19 Vaccine and Communities of Color panel discussion. My name is April Dawson, and I serve as Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Professor of Law at North Carolina Central University School of Law. And I also co-host, along with my colleague Irving Joyner, the Legal Eagle Review radio show, which broadcasts on WNCU 90.7 FM. And this program is also airing live on the wonderful WNCU 90.7 FM. Today's conversation is sponsored by the North Carolina Central University's Advanced Center for COVID-19 Related Disparities, or ACCORD, and the NCCU Virtual Justice Project. We have also partnered with WNCU 90.7 FM to host this discussion. And as I mentioned before, it is being broadcast live on this station. Tonight's panel includes several thought leaders from NCCU, including department chairpersons, a student, and an NCCU alum. And most of them actually have received one or more doses of the COVID vaccine. So we're really interested to get their thoughts. This will be an engaging discussion, and they will share their expertise and also share some personal insights and experiences. I'd like to start by introducing them. So we have Dr. Saronda Robinson. She is an epidemiologist, professor, and chair of the Department of Public Health Education. Her research interests focus on health disparities involving and resulting from social determinants of health. Dr. Robinson serves on the African American COVID Response Task Force and is a member of the NCCU Accords program. Also, one of our panelists is Dr. Yolanda Van Riel. She is the Department Chair of Nursing. She is also a part-time patient placement coordinator at First Health of the Carolinas More Regional Hospital. She has 25 years of nursing experience and 20 years as a nurse educator. She was elected to the NLN Board of Governors at Large position in 2020. Dr. Van Riel was also a North Carolina Board of Nursing member representing the BSN in higher education and served as the vice chair of the North Carolina Board of Nursing. Also with us as a panelist is Mr. Curtis Lawson. He is the director of tennis and head men's tennis coach here at NCCU. He has over 20 years of tennis instruction, coaching, and officiating experience to his credit. He entered his 21st season at NCCU in 2021 and was named to the NCAA Division I Men's and Women's Tennis Committee. And he was a 2020 MEAC Coach of the Year. Mr. Lawson is also a senior administrator at the Durham VA healthcare system. He is also a double Eagle, having earned his bachelor's degree in biology and master's degree in biochemistry from NCCU. We also have Christonia Spruill, who earned both her undergraduate and graduate degrees from NCCU in biology. She has worked in the science industry for 7 years and currently serves as a quality control scientist at Pfizer. She is a recipient of the 2020 Pfizer Impact Award for her contributions to gene therapy manufacturing. She is also a veteran of the U.S. Army. Also joining us is Dr. Deepak Kumar. He is the scientific director of the Julius L. Chambers Biomedical Biotechnology Research Institute, or BBRI, and he's also the director of the ACCORD program. He has been working statewide on NCCU's community COVID testing and education outreach initiatives. Other members of the ACCORD team is also with us. They will be helping answering questions. Also with us, who's part of the ACCORD team, is Dr. Tracy Locklear. All right, so as you can see, we have an absolutely wonderful panel, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first person we'd like to hear from is Dr. Robinson. So we know it's been a year since the first case of COVID was reported. Soon after, it was apparent that the virus was a public health emergency and global pandemic. NCCU's Advanced Center for COVID-19 Related Disparities, or ACCORD program, has been working on the front lines in 14 counties in North Carolina since July of 2020, conducting tests, surveying community members, and providing educational outreach. Can you share highlights of this project and its impact and results? And as you share that, how has the program conducted outreach to communities disproportionately impacted by COVID, specifically communities of color? And I know you've got a short presentation for us, so we'll let you go ahead and share that with us.
Thank you very much, Attorney Dawson. So as indicated, I'm from the Advanced Center for COVID-Related Disparities, or ACCORD, at NCCU. As you can see, we have several sponsoring partners: the National Institutes of Minority Health and Health Disparities, the NC Policy Collaboratory, and we also work with the NC Department of Health and Human Services. So the main things that we do in ACCORD are conduct COVID testing in the community, and we investigate the impact of COVID-19 in these underserved communities. Here you see that we represent a wide array of communities, represent a diverse economic climate and economically distressed areas with representations of minorities, high representations of minorities. We have a high representation of African Americans, Latinx, and we also work in areas with Native Americans. Here you see some of the partnering organizations in these various communities. This shows you how we're dispersed across North Carolina and some of the community-based partners that we have in those areas. So to date, Accord has conducted more than 3,500 tests and completed or collected more than 1,500 surveys. And the main things that we are investigating in these surveys are the personal impact of COVID-19 on minority communities, attitudes towards testing, vaccine trust issues, and their willingness to participate in contact tracing. So our preliminary findings thus far are that there are trust issues with testing as well as with the vaccine. Some people feel they're not informed from contact tracing, and some feel that there may be job loss with regards to getting tested. And of course, there's the concern with misinformation. The main things that we found in terms of vaccine hesitancy is that there has been a decrease in hesitancy since we began this project. Now, during these various phases, there have been developments in the availability of the vaccine. When we initially started our collecting data, the vaccine was just in stage 3 or phase 3 studies. And then in phase 2 of our data collection, that's when we topped more than 4 million deaths from COVID. And later, by the time that we ended our collection, we had received the emergency use authorization of the vaccine. So as we progressed through time with more cases and more deaths from COVID, and we got closer and closer to the vaccine being available, you see that hesitancy regarding taking the vaccine decreased. However, you see that it still remained highest among African Americans, followed by among the Latinx population. Some of the reasons reported for this hesitancy, you see the main reason were concerns about the safety of the vaccine. But as we see, trials have indicated that these vaccines are 90 to 95% effective. And in regards to the safety, some people feel that the vaccines were developed too quickly. But please know that these types of vaccines have been in development for nearly a decade. So scientists have been working on vaccines for similar SARS viruses. There's also mistrust of the government and distrust in the medical system. Some people report concerns regarding the Tuskegee syphilis study. Please note that with the Tuskegee study, treatment was withheld while they viewed the progression of the disease. With COVID vaccine, we are trying to treat and prevent deaths from a deadly virus and deadly disease. Other people noted the reason for hesitancy was that they wanted to wait for others to take the vaccine first. Well, now that the vaccine is available, people have been taking the vaccine. They've been demonstrating and sharing it with their community. And we see that the vaccine does prevent serious illness from COVID disease. In terms of our outreach efforts, we have partnered with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and we put out several announcements to share information regarding the impact of the vaccine and the impact of COVID on communities and the benefit of the vaccine. We've also partnered on some public service announcements and information sharing in the community. The Accord study has partnered with Duke to put on an educational or ethnodrama called The Crisis of Moments to raise awareness about COVID and to dispel some of the myths regarding it. We've also put out a vaccine report to raise more information regarding, to provide this information regarding the vaccine. And in terms of transparency and trust building in the community, we've shared the data that we found through virtual town hall meetings in a variety of communities in both English and Spanish, so we can reach multiple communities of color. We've also shared our information with various councils. We've shared it with church groups and other faith-based organizations. And we worked with other minority serving committees. We hope that the information that we share with you today will help you to make a more informed decision regarding receiving your vaccine. But both before and after receiving the vaccine, we remind you to continue practicing the 3 W's. So wear your mask properly, wait at least 6 feet back from others, and make sure that you're washing your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. I wanted to let the attendees know that if you have questions at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a box, a Q&A box. Feel free to ask your questions. And we're going to, at the end of hearing from all of our panelists, we'll look at the questions that are in the box and ask them to ask them. However, we do have some of our wonderful experts, Dr. Kumar, for example, will be able to answer some questions throughout the program. So you may be able to get an answer before we even get to the end of hearing from all of our panelists. Dr. Van Riel, so let's hear what you have to share. So now the healthcare profession, more specifically nurses and doctors, have proven to be heroes during this crisis. They have comforted and cared for patients and their families in their most critical times of need, especially as cases surge locally, statewide, and around the country. Now that vaccines have been distributed, there's a hope on the horizon. Can you speak to the vaccines generally? I know you've received actually both doses of vaccines, as have several members of the nursing department. Can you share with us also which specific vaccine you've received?
Thank you, Professor Lawson. So there are 3 vaccines available: Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, with Johnson & Johnson being the latest, and the federal FDA issued emergency use authorization for Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine in individuals 18 years of age and older on Saturday. So like the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines currently in use, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine protects against virus-related hospitalization and death. North Carolina is to receive more than 80,000 doses this week. So I received the Pfizer vaccine in December and my second dose in January. My husband expressed concerns with me receiving the vaccine since I had Bell's palsy in 2019. So I did my research and I talked with my neurologist. And that's when I made the decision to take the vaccine. Faculty and students either receive Pfizer or Moderna. And that's because Johnson & Johnson wasn't available at that time. If it had been, students, faculty, and myself, we would have took the first one available. Nursing students have begun administering vaccinations. They administered some this past weekend at Durham VA healthcare system. Nursing faculty are also planning to administer vaccinations, and students are planning to help Duke University Health System and UNC administer vaccinations. Also, North Carolina Central University have been approved as a mass vaccination site. What I want to leave with you today is my father was in an assisted living facility for rehab, and he died last month, 2 days after isolation ended for COVID-19. I often wonder if the healthcare workers at this facility, or if he received one of these vaccines, if he would be alive today. I encourage you to talk with your healthcare provider if you have questions about receiving one of these vaccines. COVID-19 vaccines and the continued use of the 3 Ws are the most effective ways to help stop the spread of COVID-19, prevent hospitalizations and death. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Van Riel, and thank you for sharing your personal story with us, and we are deeply sorry for your loss. Mr. Curtis Lawson, Coach Lawson, so you not only work with students in your role as head tennis coach, you also serve at the Durham VA Health Center. You were part of an initial group of healthcare workers who received the vaccine in December. Why was receiving the vaccine important to you, and what would you share with others? Coach Lawson, you are muted. Great.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dawson, for that question. And I would first say that receiving the vaccine was important to me because it served as a layer of protection for my family and I against the coronavirus. I would secondly say that having spent my entire professional career in healthcare and college athletics, I have a great deal of respect for the scientific work that has gone into the development of the vaccines to the extent that the vaccines have saved and will save millions of lives, not only in the US, but across the globe. I would lastly say that as a leader, I feel obligated to help educate, encourage, and to bring awareness to important topics such as this. As it was previously noted, communities of color, Black and Brown people in particular, are disproportionately affected by the coronavirus. So if I can help inspire just one person to take the vaccine, then that's one life saved. I think that it sets up for us getting one step closer to some semblance of normalcy. I would also note that my team is represented by student athletes that come from across the world, and dating back to the fall and the winter, we had numerous discussions about the virus and how it has impacted athletics in so many different ways, and how it is important when given the opportunity to take the vaccine to do just that. And so I was delighted and encouraged when I received a WhatsApp call from one of my team captains from Israel back in December to say, "Hey, Coach, I've got an opportunity to get vaccinated. What do you think I should do?" And so we talked briefly, but really without any hesitation. I told him that if he did have an opportunity to take the vaccine, which was the Pfizer vaccine, that he should proceed. In that instance, with having to take 2 shots, it would require him to arrive back to campus a week later. So we had that discussion with the administration, which was not an issue because he's a 4.0 student, but it was very encouraging, both in his leadership role within our small unit, for his teammates and for his peers across campus to know that, okay, one of our own has now been vaccinated and everything is okay. And as I was told earlier today, he is one of just 3 student athletes that has been vaccinated thus far. So we're very excited and encouraged that we're trying to make a positive impact, both within the NCCU community and in the broader community at large.
Thank you, Coach Lawson. I wanted to mention that this is being recorded, and if you would like to have access to a recording, it will be available via YouTube. And so we'll make sure that that information gets out to everyone. So if you know someone who can benefit from watching this, please encourage them to access the recording. Or if you want to go back, if there was something that you missed or some response that you want to go back to, know that you'll have that opportunity. Also want to thank Dr. Brittany Baker. She is in the Q&A box answering questions very promptly, so we want to thank her. She is a clinical assistant professor of nursing. Our next panelist we are going to hear from is Ms. Christonia Spruill. And Ms. Spruill, thank you so much for being a part of this important discussion. So interestingly enough, you are not only an alumna of NCCU who earned both a bachelor's and a master's degree in biology, but you are now employed at one of the 3 pharmaceutical companies that is currently producing an FDA-approved vaccine. You shared your personal testimony late last year as you believed the vaccine was important, particularly for communities of color. Would you share your thoughts with us today?
Thank you, April. I want to start by thanking Dr. Robinson for that wonderful presentation. I'm always impressed every time I hear her present on what Accord is doing. Thank you to all the sponsors for the opportunity to talk with you guys today and be on the panel with all these wonderful people. Yes, a little while ago, I did take to my social media and express my opinions about the COVID-19 vaccination. And the reason I thought it was important to do so was, one, because I noticed that there was so much misinformation being shared on social media. And I felt like when you have a platform, you have a certain responsibility to use it the right way. And then another reason I felt it was important to speak out was because I was getting, as the first scientist in my family, I got a lot of questions from my family and friends about how vaccinations work, and do I think it's important for them to get it? Do I think it's safe? And in a sense, they had the same concerns that the people who responded to the survey that Dr. Robinson gave us the results for. They were also concerned about the safety. They were worried about the speed. How can it be safe so quickly? Again, they were hearing those myths. And so they were looking for a reliable source of information. So I took to social media and I just expressed that as a scientist, as someone who's seen the work that's done in the lab space to develop these type of products, as someone who's seen the hard work that people put in and know people personally who have been involved in manufacturing vaccinations, and who really understand how critical it is to get things right. We understand that we have people's lives literally in our hands every day when we do our testing. And so I wanted to just speak out and say and encourage everyone to trust that scientists are doing the best that they can, and encourage them by just letting them know, although things are happening fast, this is necessary to save lives. It's necessary to move faster than we've moved before. And we have the technology and we have the scientists to do it and do it safely and effectively. So I thought it was important to make sure that I spoke out about that. The reason it is important, that I think it's important for us as communities of color in particular to get the vaccine, is because after doing some research on the CDC website and some other sources, it was apparent to me that COVID-19 is more likely to kill, a person of color. And so when we're considering whether or not to get vaccinated, we need to just factor that in, that we are more likely, if we were exposed to it, more likely to succumb to the disease. And so why were we more likely to succumb? Because we, communities of color, just have more instances of those diseases that make you more likely to pass away. For example, diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, kidney disease. And if you go on the website, they list many more. But if you're like me, you know someone who falls in one of those categories. And that was cause for concern. I think it should be a red flag for every person of color. And it should be motivation to protect yourself and your family from this disease if you can. And another thing I wanted to say is that it's not only the health concerns that make us more likely to succumb to this disease or to be exposed to it. What other factors should we consider? Black people, brown people are more likely to not be able to take off of work because we may not have the opportunity to work from home. So we are those essential workers that are still putting ourselves at risk every day. So we're more likely to contract it. And then we become more likely to pass it to our families because we can't maybe afford the same daycare, or there are social economic disparities that are apparent in minority communities, and those put us at greater risk of contracting the disease. And then once contracted, we're also at greater risk of succumbing to the disease. And so for those reasons, I really encourage everyone that I can, and I just provide information. I encourage everyone to research, get the information that you need to make an informed decision for yourself and your family. And that's what I'm so happy that we're able to do today. And we're going to continue to do it. We're going to continue to just help everyone make an informed decision. So that's why I felt like it was important for me to speak up.
Thank you so much for sharing and your comments and being such an engaging member of the community. Sharing that information is incredibly valuable, as it has been with all of our panelists. We can't thank you all enough for the good work you're doing and the education that you're doing for our community. We would also like to thank, we've got Dr. William Pinkington, who is also answering questions. He is the director of NCCU's HOPE program, and he has led ACCORD in its testing efforts. So thank you so much as well for answering questions. So we've heard from all of our wonderful panelists, and I've got a few questions that I'm going to start off with, but I encourage you all to go ahead and ask any questions that you have, put it in the Q&A box, and we will get to those that aren't answered by our wonderful folks who are monitoring the Q&A box. Let's see. Okay, so the first question, and any of you can feel free to answer this question, and this is a common question that folks have. And it is, can someone still get COVID or be a carrier of the COVID virus if they get the vaccine?
I guess I can answer that one if no one else would like to. So for me, at first, I thought that you couldn't be a carrier because you think you have the vaccine, you should be safe, and everyone around you should be safe. That is not, unfortunately, that is not the case. And this is why it's still important for everyone to wear their masks, wash your hands, and wait 6 feet, even though you have gotten the vaccination. So why? Because before the virus is able to actually get into your system enough to impact your system, there are other ways to transmit it before it affects you. For example, the virus can live in your nasal pharynx for a little while before you actually breathe it in. And let's say you were to sneeze on someone, that's a possibility of you transmitting the virus to someone else. Although if the virus were to get into your system, you are protected. The person that you sneezed on may not be protected. And that's just one example. And when you think about being encouraged to wash your hands, right, and not touch your face, I think about it, if I wash my hands, I've gotten the vaccination, but if I don't wash my hands and I've touched multiple places and then I go to touch my son's face, would I then pass it to him who is not vaccinated? So it's important for us to consider those ways, other ways to transmit this, this virus. And so, yes, it can possibly be transmitted.
I would
Thank you, Ms.
also
Spruill.
like to add, please be reminded that the vaccine prevents severe illness from the disease. So you may still experience some minor symptoms. And also the vaccines are only 90 to 95% effective. So there is still that 5 to 10% chance that you can be infected with the disease. So again, it is important to still practice the 3 W's: wearing your mask, wash your hands, and waiting 6 feet back.
And Dr. Robinson, you mentioned the efficacy of the first 2 vaccines. So there's a third vaccine, Johnson & Johnson. Can you talk about, or can one of the panelists talk about this third vaccine that's now available and the differences and how folks should think about of the 3 vaccines, what they should consider when deciding whether to get a vaccine, and if so, which one?
Yes. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is said to be about 74% effective. It's been 86% effective in some US studies. But it's important to get either of the 3 vaccines. Some of the benefits of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is that because it doesn't require storage at such a low temperature as the other 2 vaccine does, then it can be available in a variety of communities. So in some areas that did not have proper freezers to store those, the previous 2 vaccines, or for people who couldn't get to areas where those vaccines were stored, now the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be more available to them. We can take the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to rural communities. So it's beneficial for you to get either of the vaccines to which you may gain access. All of them have effectiveness against the virus.
And can you also talk about the single dose of Johnson & Johnson versus the double dose of the Moderna and Pfizer? Dr. Kumar?
Yes, I mean, I can, so I think as Dr. Robinson said, that all the vaccines are very good vaccines. The difference is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a single shot vaccine. The advantages are huge. It still protects 85% from having a severe disease. That in itself is a big advantage. The second is that it protects 100% of individuals who took the vaccine were protected against hospitalization and death. And that's what we are hoping for from any vaccine. So it is a really, really good vaccine to take. Moreover, it's a single shot vaccine. The storage condition is not as extreme as is by Pfizer vaccine. So I think there are a lot of good things. And having 3 vaccines, we will be able to cover a lot of population that is needed to prevent the spread of COVID in general, including the variants.
Thank you. And there was a request that I read a comment from Mr. Richard Gordon. He says, thank you for this discussion. It will go a long way in increasing the needed trust. I just had my 2nd shot today and encourage all I encounter to do the same. And I appreciate Dr. Kumar asking me to read that comment, because that was actually a comment by my father, who is listening in. And so my siblings and myself are ecstatic that he's got that added protection, and we're anxiously awaiting being able to get our vaccines so that we can visit him and feel comforted knowing that we're not unduly exposing him. So thank you, Dad. All right, let's see. All right, here's another question that we have. If you had the virus, should you still get vaccinated?
So I guess I can answer that one. Yes, the short answer is yes, you should still get vaccinated. Why? Why should I still get vaccinated? Because there's not enough data to support how long natural immunity, how long you would have protection after being exposed to the true coronavirus. But we are gathering data on the effectiveness and the length of immunity that you have from vaccinations. And so you would still want to get vaccinated so that you will know how long you are protected. And if the vaccines end up requiring a boost, similar to the flu vaccine each year, then you will know you have continued protection. So yes, still get vaccinated.
And so who should not get vaccinated, or what considerations should folks pay particular attention to if they are in a vulnerable group?
So I think I can answer some of it. So right now, CDC guidelines are pretty clear, and I think you should, everyone should follow CDC guidelines. Everybody should get vaccinated. There are certain categories where there are, certain conditions CDC has put forward. For example, if you had COVID and if you're given antibody therapy as a therapeutic, then you should wait for 90 days before you get vaccinated. So Accord has compiled some information, and we will be putting information on the Accord webpage as well as a resource page, but CDC is a great resource to go to. Right now, the vaccines are approved for 18 and up, 16 and up. In case of Pfizer, they are still evaluating the efficacy from 12 to 18 years old. We don't have the data yet. So it's going to be some time before they allow anybody younger than that. Specific cases, as Dr. Baker mentioned in the chat, people should consult with their providers on specific cases. But in general, these are the CDC guidelines which we should follow.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up question in the Q&A, which is, if you have the sickle cell trait, should one be vaccinated?
So we don't have anything adverse in that case. But again, if you have very specific concern, because there are some rare diseases, syndromes that people are concerned on an individual basis, I think in that case, people should approach their providers to get that specific, answers.
Yeah, and I think that bears emphasizing, this is great information that we all need to think about. Any medical decision that you make, you should definitely consult with your doctor and continue to be educated based on your specific situations. Let's see, another question in the Q&A box is, is this a yearly vaccine like the flu? Is this something that folks would have to anticipate getting every year?
So the jury is still out on that. We have to remember that the clinical trials just started in September, and we are still continuing to gather data. The data tells us right now that the current vaccines, if you get your first dose, you have a certain level of protection, but it requires 2 doses for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, 1 dose for the Johnson & Johnson. And we're watching the data. Scientists everywhere are watching the data to see how long does the first dose give you your protection for? How long do you have protection for after both doses? And how long does that protection last? As we continue to gather data, let's say at the 1-year mark in September, for example, then we may have data to support what we need to do after a year of being vaccinated. But right now we don't have the data to answer that question.
Thank you, Ms. Spruill. There are a couple of all the questions that have been answered, really outstanding questions. We do have folks who are listening and not on Zoom, and so not able to read those questions and answers. So I'm going to ask some of those questions as well, even though they've been answered in chat. And one of the questions was, how do you address concerns about the COVID variants? And so we know that in some countries like South Africa, Brazil, there are variants of the COVID. How does the current vaccines, what should we be concerned about when it comes to the efficacy of the vaccines when it comes to these variances?
You're muted, Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, I can take that if that's okay. So
Yes.
I think all the three vaccines do provide a good degree of protection against variants. All the vaccines provide approximately 86% of protection from hospitalization and deaths, including the J&J vaccine. And that includes the effects of these variants. So there is every good reason, to take these vaccines to protect against those variants as well. So they do provide protection.
Thank you. So there's a lot of discussion about herd immunity. Can someone just kind of explain what that means and why that is critical as we're thinking about the community becoming vaccinated?
So, and I can answer that question. So herd immunity is when a lot of people in the community are protected because of the immunity provided by the vaccine, so that the spread of the virus is contained. So if a person is infected somehow, then a person is surrounded by individuals who have gained that, who already have the immunity. So the virus will not spread any further. And I think, and that underscores the importance of everybody gets vaccinated. If we will not have 80-85%, depending on, there is a bit of jury out there, but if we will not be able to vaccinate 80-85% of individuals, then we will not be able to achieve that herd immunity, which is needed to really contain the spread of this virus.
Right. Can I add something to that, Dr. Kumar?
Yes, please.
So we would possibly, and it's hard to even say this, we would probably achieve herd immunity eventually. But the way that we would get there is because it will be by more people contracting the disease. And that is a gamble that I don't think you want to take, because as more people contract it, then we have more people to die. So that is not the way we want to achieve herd immunity. The best way to achieve it is to get the vaccines.
That's such a good point, Ms. Spruill. Thank you.
And achieving herd immunity, can you talk about the effect that has on the creation of variances? So if you have people that continue to get it, you may build up herd immunity, but doesn't that also increase the chances of variances, which then could mean people are reinfected?
Actually, it's the opposite. If you have herd immunity, you have less chances of creating variant. Because for variant to appear, the virus has to multiply. And if you have more individuals who are able to fight this virus, and virus is not able to multiply, then you will have less chances of variants getting produced.
So there's a benefit.
It's a benefit. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so a benefit to have herd immunity through the vaccine, as opposed to developing herd immunity by people getting the virus.
Right. And that's a very, very good point Ms. Spruill made, that it's so better to have the vaccine than having the other way. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Let's see, we've got some other good questions here. So here's a question. We were talking about those that might need to think twice about getting the vaccine. A question related to, is the vaccine safe for mothers who are breastfeeding?
So I think Dr. Baker answered it very well in the chat. That if you're pregnant and that goes with breastfeeding as well, you should have a conversation with your provider. However, WHO and CDC, they do recommend individuals, mothers who are breastfeeding, to take the vaccine. There is nothing. There is no virus available. There is no virus in the vaccine, so there is nothing to transmit. So they do, and I have also posted a link in the chat where you have a bit of more information if you want to read a little bit more and go into technical details in terms of that. The vaccine trial did not include any pregnant women.
And as far as the resources that have been posted in the chat, we are going to make sure that those links and resources are made available on the Accord page. And so if you don't have access to Zoom, if you're listening via Facebook or YouTube or through WNCU, I will give you a website that you can go to, and you can have access to all of these links and wonderful information that's being provided. So there's a question about, so we mentioned that some of our students have been vaccinated. Many of our faculty and researchers have been vaccinated. So there's a question about how many NCCU students and staff have been vaccinated. Do we know that number?
So I can answer that. We do not know the exact number, but I do know that all the nursing faculty, except for one, has been vaccinated, and only because she went out of town and she is looking for a place to get vaccinated now. And all the students were offered vaccinations, and some of them already received it from where they work at. And so we don't know the exact number, but most of them have.
Thank you, Dr. Van Riel. So a couple of questions about the second dose. So one question is there a difference in the effect of the second dose from the first dose? Like, could there be a harsher reaction to the second dose? And a related question is, what happens if someone gets a first dose, but they don't get that second dose?
Well, the first dose is what's considered a primer. It's starting your body to build the antibodies to resist infection. And the second dose is the boost dose. So some people are receiving more side effects from that second dose because that's the body's reaction to something new being introduced into the body. So it's already starting to fight off the introduction of new things into the body. So it's very important for you to get both doses because you're known to be 90 to 95% protected against it after that second dose. So it's not guaranteed that you have the same level of effectiveness after just receiving the first dose. So it's very important to receive both doses. And yes, you may receive some side effects, but these side effects are short-term and not known to be fatal. So the side effects that you receive from the vaccine are much less than the side effects or the symptoms of the actual disease.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to point out that, each person reacts differently. Whereas I had a sore arm just like I did when I get the flu vaccine, somebody else might have something different. So I wouldn't base you receiving the vaccine on what somebody else has had symptoms.
And the most common symptoms would be headache, fever, and fatigue.
Yes, so you are encouraged to stay well hydrated, to get rest, and you may treat these symptoms with Tylenol, ibuprofen, or some other over-the-counter medication. But these symptoms typically subside within 24 to 36 hours.
Thank you all for that. Let's see, it was another question that was regarding where we are now. What do you feel about the decline or uprise of hesitancy in communities of color? This one requires some contemplation.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Robinson has a lot of great data that really put on display the hesitancy and what the source of that hesitancy is. And I expect ACORD would probably do some sort of follow-up to see if that feeling changes over time. But I do recognize that it's valid concerns that people have. I'm hoping that forums like this would provide the information to provide the comfort and the confidence that people need to make a decision, and encourage them to know, just to think about outside of themselves for a moment and think about how important the vaccination is to reaching herd immunity that we discussed earlier, and how important that herd immunity is to the community and to the world. We have to think of this as a global problem and know that, every vaccination counts. And it's gonna take everyone to work together to achieve this goal. And so what I think about where things are now, just looking at that data, and it would make me feel like we have a long way to go to communicating and convincing people to take the vaccine. That falls in line with what I'm hearing from my community, the concerns, but I'm doing everything that I can, and I'm sure everyone on this panel is doing everything they can to impact and make those numbers rise. And I think that it's just really, I take it as a call to action. And this point, like this is, whenever you asked me the first question and you said I shared my testimony on Facebook, and people consider it a testimony because I had a change of heart. And I wasn't a fan of vaccinations. And this one, when it first was proposed and you hear about the Operation Warp Speed and things like that, it did make me, even as a scientist, a little nervous about that. And so I had to do some research and just thinking about what I know as a scientist, thinking about, is this possible to do it this fast? What would it take to do it that fast? Are those things happening? And I realized that yes, those things are happening, and it is time to act fast. And so I had a change of heart. And so yes, I trust this vaccine, these vaccinations for COVID-19. And so, yes, I think that other people can have change of hearts as well. And those numbers can increase, hopefully.
Thank you.
I would echo those sentiments with respect to the importance of having forums like this that are able to engage the community and provide information that is meaningful by way of diverse panels, by way of just a broad-based attack, if you will. So with the same sense of urgency that just with the reference of the Project Warp Speed, I think that the messaging is really important. There was a recent article in the New York Times that spoke to kind of the role of the media and how there is a somewhat imbalanced reporting that then prompts a sense of alarmism, and how while the media could perhaps do a better job with tempering the data and not so much focusing on the what ifs, which then create more angst and more nervousness about taking the vaccines, but really focus more on the safety and the efficacy and all of the lives that are being saved. And I think that information is out there, but I'm not so convinced that to the degree that it is convincing, in particular, communities of color to make that leap. So we still have lots of work to do. And I think that we're getting there slowly but surely.
And to your point, Coach Lawson, that's why this program is so vitally important, and we can't encourage you all enough to share this program with your friends and family, your churches, your community, because the more information we get out, the more people understand, the sooner we can get to a point where we are all much safer during this time of this global pandemic. We're coming up on the top of the hour, just a couple of other questions. So one question was, how long after the second dose are you 90 to 95% covered from COVID? And Dr. Baker in the chat mentioned that it takes 14 days post-vaccination for your body to reach the maximum immune response for protection against COVID. So I'm sure that's a question that other folks had who may not have access to the question box. Another question that was asked was, how are people getting notified of where to get vaccines? Is this information being mailed to individuals? Is the census information being used to help individuals? And most of this information is available somewhere on the internet. As I mentioned before, and as we're getting ready to wrap up, I'm going to give you the website for Accord. And you can go to that website, you can find information, you can find links to other places, county specific, where you can find out as much information as you can about the vaccines. It can be challenging for some folks, especially if we're thinking about those that may not have access to technology. Know that North Carolina Central University is here to support not just the students, but also the community. So if you have any questions following this show, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, any one of us, and we will get you the information that you need. So we have hit 7 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and end it, but hopefully this will not be the last discussion that we have, because we still have a long way to go before we turn the corner on this. But I'd like to thank our panelists. You all have been absolutely wonderful sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your personal stories with us. Dr. Robinson, Dr. Van Riel, Mr. Lawson, Ms. Spruill. And we'd like to thank our planning committee, especially Ayana Hernandez. She is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Office of Communications and Marketing. She worked incredibly hard pulling all of this together. We'd also like to give a big thanks to Miranda Elliott, who is taking care of us on the tech side. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And so we want to express our appreciation to her as well. So we'll be posting the resources that were discussed this evening and included in the chat box and the questions box. And you can go to www.nccu.edu/accord, ACCORD. And you'll see a list of resources on that website. Again, we want to thank you for spending your time with us, and thank you in advance for sharing this information with those in your community. So with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a night. Please continue to be safe, take care of yourselves and your families and your community, and know that NCCU is here for you.
I guess we just sign off.